Very pleased to stand in this moment of urgency and also make a contribution to this bill. I wasn't a member of the Commerce Select Committee, but I was pleased that I was able to stand here with my colleagues who worked so cooperatively to get this through. The Motor Vehicle Sales Amendment Bill, second reading, we are supporting this bill. It is a bill which really builds on or amends slightly something that was the primary bill that was brought in by a Labor government. It was worked on under Labor. It's been heard in this House. It was brought to this House over a year ago, and now in urgency we are hopefully going to progress it quickly. I want to, Mr. Speaker, just refer to a couple of points on the purpose of this bill, which is obviously to promote the interests of consumers in relation to motor vehicle sales. I mean, we hear a lot about the trustworthiness or not of used car salespeople. They're likened to politicians often. It's all we can do, I think, is to raise their profile, in the hope perhaps that our profile might get raised as well. But what I'd like to say is that the bill is making a number of changes. It actually reduces compliance costs. It helps those people in the industry with those compliance costs, but at the same time ensures that consumers are guaranteed the protection in the buying and selling of used cars. As I said before, it amends quite not dramatically, but slightly, the Motor Vehicle Sales Act 2003. It was brought under the previous government. And the policy of that act had several core elements. It was a requirement for those trading motor vehicles to be registered. It required the disclosure concerning motor vehicles, and it provided for consumer redress through the Motor Vehicles Disputes Tribunal. So in many ways it was a very good piece of legislation to try and tidy up, clarify and give certainty for those people who are involved in buying and selling motor vehicles, and particularly the consumers. The fact that it's come back to the House now, Mr. Speaker, under urgency is somewhat perplexing. I wouldn't have thought this is the reason that we needed to work into midnight to try and progress. But nevertheless, now that it's here and we both agree on it, but all sides agree on it, I guess the point is to get it through. A requirement of that 2003 Act was to have it reviewed after 2 years, and the Ministry of Consumer Affairs completed that review, and that was tabled in the House in 2006. And the review considered how the registration process, banning provisions, information disclosure process and the Motor Vehicle Disputes Tribunal were in fact operating. And this amendment bill flows out of that review of the operations. It makes a number of recommendations. I won't go through them all, but I think that what's important is that perhaps the first recommendation, it's recommended under 39(2) that clause be amended to remove the requirement for motor vehicle traders to make an annual statutory declaration of their trading details, where these have not changed. This would be replaced by a requirement to conform with each annual renewal that details have not changed. I mean, in many ways they're very simple, Mr. Speaker, very simple change. It's a very simple change, but it lessens the requirements on motor vehicle traders to go through hoops that are largely unnecessary. And the Labor Party, just like any other party, is certainly for and supports any moves that will enable business in New Zealand to progress more speedily with the minimum amount of loopholes and things. The minimum amount of obstacles in their way. technically, one of the interesting things there, technically, one of the recommendations is it technically amends the CC rating of motorcycles. It's recommended that Section 6, B3, definition of a motor vehicle be amended to exclude motorcycles up to 50cc, not 60cc as currently worded, to reflect ratings used on other relevant legislation. So it brings it more or less into line with other legislation, and again, more or less a technical change. And again, it sort of perplexes me why we are here under urgency, and to ensure that those sorts of changes, moving from 60cc to 50cc definitions, is so urgent that we have to put this through an urgency process. It does extend inspection powers to the Commerce Commission. It's recommended that consideration be given to amending the inspection powers of Section 124 to 129 to also include the Commerce Commission, to allow appropriate enforcement of the information provisions of the MVSA, and explored within the powers of the Fair Trading Act 1986 as well. Again, I think this provision, in a sense, once more, it extends in a sense, the comfort zone and the security that consumers have in the buying and selling of used cars and motor vehicles. And although in that line, my first car, by the way, was called Molly. It was a Morris Minor van, and so I think that it was a 1958. But I currently own a 1957 MGA, which actually doesn't have a name. I've gone backwards rather than moving forwards, which I've been trying to restore unsuccessfully for the last 12, 15 years. It is a hole that I pour money into, according to my wife. But I am diverging from this debate, Mr. Speaker, and I'd like to get back to recommendation number 8. Which is an ability to award costs to any party for non-attendance at a motor vehicle disputes tribunal. And again, what this bill does is it recommends that Section 14 of Schedule 1 be amended to allow costs to be awarded against any party to a claim for non-attendance at a hearing for no good cause. Once again, as I say, Mr. Speaker, it tidies up a lot of the legislation that was first brought in 2003, where the review of it was done in 2006. So it's been sitting there now for 4 years, and we've been wanting to do that. It's good that it is being done, Mr. Speaker, now. But as I say, and I repeat the point that I've made before, undertaking this under urgency. I mean, my sense is that urgency should be used for pieces of critical legislation that need to go through in a particular time and will have a big bearing, an important bearing on New Zealand. I don't really think that fits that particular criteria. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
David Clendon.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and kia ora koutou. Mr. Speaker, it's interesting that New Zealanders seem to have a